They accused Moses of exalting himself too much. The same man who begged God not to destroy Israel. The same man who asked to have his name erased from the book of life if it would save the people. 250 leaders looked at the humblest man on earth and said, "You think too highly of yourself." The next day, the earth opened and swallowed them. The book of Numbers records the event with details that make any reader stop and reread. It was not metaphor. It was not poetic language. The ground literally opened, swallowed entire families, and closed again. And to understand why God responded with such violence, you need to understand what was really at stake in that desert. Israel had approximately 2 million people camped in the middle of nowhere. No supermarkets, no hospitals, no sewage system, no basic infrastructure of any kind. The only thing keeping that human mass functioning without descending into absolute chaos was order. Clear hierarchy, rigid structure. Each tribe knew exactly where to camp. Each family knew its specific function. The Levites took care of the tabernacle. The priests mediated between God and the people. And at the center of everything, the tent of meeting, where God's very presence visibly dwelt in a pillar of cloud during the day and fire during the night. This was not abstract religion. It was physical, tangible reality, impossible to ignore. God was there, literally there. You could see the cloud, you could see the fire, and proximity to that presence demanded specific protocols that were not suggestions, were not recommendations, were not negotiable under any circumstances. Korah was a Levite, cousin of Moses and Aaron, from the same family, the same blood, the same lineage. He already had privileges that no other tribe of Israel possessed. The Levites were the only ones authorized to touch the sacred objects during the transport of the tabernacle. While the other 11 tribes kept respectful distance, the Levites dismantled, carried on their own shoulders, and reassembled the structure where God dwelt. But Korah wanted more. He watched Aaron entering the holy place and thought, "Why him and not me?" He observed Moses receiving direct instructions from God and rationalized, "We are all holy. The whole congregation is holy. Why do these two place themselves above all of us?" The logic seemed democratic. It seemed fair. It even seemed spiritually mature. After all, had God not said that Israel would be a kingdom of priests? Had he not promised that the entire nation would be holy? Korah took true promises and twisted them to justify personal ambition disguised as religious zeal. And he did not come alone. He brought 250 men. They were not common people, not anonymous citizens complaining in corners. Numbers chapter 16 describes them as leaders of the congregation, called to assemblies, men of renown, the elite of Israel, tribal leaders whose words carried political weight, people that others followed without. A question. Dathan and Abiram also joined, from the tribe of Reuben. They carried another grievance, different but complementary. Reuben was Jacob's firstborn. By the logic of the era, by established tradition, the tribe of Reuben should lead Israel. But tribal leadership went to Judah, the priesthood went to Levi. Reuben was left with nothing special, no particular distinction. Dathan and Abiram carried generations of compressed resentment, waiting only for an opportunity to explode. The coalition was formed, Levites wanting a priesthood that did not belong to them, Reubenites wanting political leadership that was denied them, 250 princes wanting validation for their ambitions, and all of them aiming at the same two targets, Moses and Aaron. The accusation was public, made before witnesses. They came to Moses and said, according to Numbers 16 verse 3, "Enough, for the whole congregation is holy, every one of them is holy, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" When Moses heard this, he fell face down to the ground. He did not respond immediately. He did not defend himself. He did not counterattack with arguments. He prostrated himself in silence. And this reaction reveals something crucial about the character of the man being accused. The leader accused of arrogance responded with the humblest posture humanly possible. After rising, Moses proposed a test. Simple, direct, impossible to manipulate or contest. He told Korah and his followers, "Tomorrow, each of you take a censer, put fire and incense in it, and present yourselves before the Lord. Aaron will do the same, and God will show who is holy and whom he has chosen to come near to him." 250 censers, 250 men preparing to do what only Aaron had divine authorization to do. Burning incense before God was the exclusive prerogative of the high priest. Two of Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, had already died for offering strange fire. The precedent was documented, known to all. But Korah and his followers chose to ignore it. The next morning, the entire camp knew what was about to happen. 2 million people watching 250 men marching toward the tabernacle with bronze censers smoking in their hands. Aaron on one side with his censer, Korah and his multitude on the other. The tension was physical, palpable. Dathan and Abiram refused to appear. They sent a message to Moses, dripping with contempt in every word. They said, "You brought us out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, and now you also want to make yourself prince over us." For them, Egypt was the promised land. Egypt, where they had been slaves for 400 years. The selective memory of resentment distorts any reality. Moses became very angry. He asked God not to accept their offering. Then he walked to where Dathan and Abiram were, standing at the entrance of their tents, with wives, children, and all their possessions scattered around them. The elders of Israel followed behind, witnesses to what was about to happen. And then Moses did something he had never done before. He proposed a specific supernatural validation, detailed, impossible to falsify. He said to the people, "If these men die a natural death, as all human beings die, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates something completely new, if the earth opens its mouth and swallows them with everything they possess, then you will know that these men have despised the Lord." He had barely finished speaking. The ground cracked. It was not a generalized earthquake affecting the entire camp. It was not a random natural disaster without direction. The biblical text is surgical in its description. The earth opened its mouth specifically beneath Dathan, Abiram and their families, beneath Korah and all his possessions. The tents disappeared into the abyss that formed. People fell screaming into the darkness, and the earth closed over them. Imagine the sound, solid rock splitting like torn fabric, screams of terror echoing more and more distant until they completely disappeared into silence. And then, nothing. Ground closed, leveled, as if nothing had happened, except that entire families had simply ceased to exist on the surface of the earth. The people nearby fled running in all directions. They screamed in panic, "The earth will swallow us too!" Terror spread through the camp like fire through dry straw, but the earth was not the only divine response that day. Numbers 16 verse 35 records that fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense before the tabernacle. 250 bodies carbonized instantly. 250 bronze censers fallen on the ground, still smoking, with no living owners to collect them. 2 simultaneous judgments executed at the same moment. Earth for the main instigators, fire from heaven for the followers, and a message impossible to ignore. Approaching God outside the terms he established is not an expression of spiritual freedom, it is deliberate suicide. But here is the detail that makes everything even more disturbing, even more difficult to process. The next day, less than 24 hours later, the people complained again. Numbers 16 verse 41 records, "The whole congregation grumbled against Moses and Aaron, saying, 'You have killed the people of the Lord.' They had just seen with their own eyes the earth swallow entire families. They had just witnessed fire from heaven consume 250 men in seconds. And the conclusion they drew was that Moses and Aaron were guilty of the massacre. The human capacity to distort clear evidence to protect preformed conclusions simply has no limit. God reacted immediately to this new rebellion. A plague began to spread through the camp. People began to drop dead where they stood, without warning, without prior symptoms. The text says, Moses sent Aaron running with burning incense to make atonement for the people. Aaron placed himself literally at the boundary between the dead and the living, burning incense, and the plague stopped exactly where he stood. 14,700 people died in that plague, in addition to those swallowed by the earth, in addition to the 250 burned by celestial fire. In less than 48 hours, nearly 15,000 people perished because they questioned the order God had established for his people. And yet God provided an additional confirmation to end any remaining doubt. He commanded each tribe to bring a wooden staff with the leader's name written on it. 12 staffs were placed before the Ark of the Covenant during the night in the most holy place. The next morning, 11 staffs remained exactly as they were left. Pieces of dry, dead wood without life. But Aaron's staff had sprouted during the night. It produced buds, open blossoms, and fully ripe almonds in just a few hours. Dead wood generating instant life. Absolutely incontestable supernatural proof that God had chosen Aaron's lineage for the priesthood. That staff was kept inside the Ark of the Covenant, along with the tablets of the law and the jar of manna, permanent memorial of divine choice and of the rebellion that tried to annul it by human means. But why such severity? Why did God not simply ignore the complaint, let it pass, or respond with a milder warning, a second chance? The answer lies in the broader context. Israel had been in the wilderness for approximately 2 years at that point. They had already seen the 10 plagues devastating Egypt. They had already crossed the Red Sea on dry ground between walls of water. They had already received water gushing from solid rock, manna falling from heaven every morning, quail in abundance when they complained about meat. They had already witnessed Mount Sinai smoking while God descended upon it. They had already heard the divine voice thundering the 10 Commandments. They were not people without information who deserved extra patience. They were not ignorant ones who had never seen God's power in action. They were eyewitnesses of consecutive miracles who deliberately chose to question the order God established with his own hands. And there was another crucial factor. Israel was on the way to Canaan. Soon they would enter wars of conquest against fortified peoples. They would need absolute discipline, clear hierarchy, unquestioning obedience in critical moments of battle. A nation internally divided by rival factions would be massacred by external enemies before conquering any territory. Korah's rebellion was not just an internal religious matter. It was an existential threat to the survival of the people. If leaders could publicly question the authority of Moses and Aaron and come out completely unpunished, the entire command structure would collapse. Any discontented person could do exactly the same. Anyone could form their own dissident faction. The people would fragment into rival groups, disputing legitimacy while marching toward war. God responded with surgical violence to preserve the entire nation from future destruction. 15,000 died so that 2 million could survive and fulfill their purpose. Divine mathematics does not always make sense from the immediate human perspective, but looking back with historical distance, the alternative would have been complete anarchy and total destruction at the hands of the Canaanites. There is also the question of what Korah really wanted behind the beautiful words. He said he sought equality for all, that the whole congregation was equally holy, that everyone should have the same access to God. But his actions revealed a completely different motivation. He did not want to eliminate Israel's hierarchy. He wanted to occupy the top of it. He did not want everyone to be equally priests. He wanted to be the chief priest instead of Aaron. The rhetoric of equality masked raw ambition for personal power, and God, who sees the human heart with perfect clarity, responded not only to the words spoken, but to the real motivation hidden behind them. The bronze censers lay scattered on the ground after the fire consumed their owners. God gave specific instructions about what to do with those objects, stained by judgment. Numbers chapter 17 records that Eleazar, Aaron's son, personally collected all 250 censers and transformed them into hammered plates to cover the bronze altar. Every time a priest approached to offer sacrifice for the people, he saw that bronze gleaming. Permanent memorial, constant visual warning that there are lines that are not crossed, approaches that are not attempted, divine prerogatives that are not usurped under any justification. The altar covered with bronze from the censers of men killed by celestial fire. The place where sacrifices were offered for atonement was now coated with physical evidence of what happens when someone tries to approach God on their own terms, ignoring the terms God established. The story of Korah echoes throughout Scripture as a permanent warning. Jude, in the New Testament, mentions people who perished in Korah's rebellion as an example of divine judgment on false teachers who infiltrate the church. The rebellion became a recognized theological category, eternal archetype of spiritual insubordination disguised as religious zeal. But there is a redemptive nuance that many readers completely miss. Korah's sons did not die with their father. Numbers chapter 26 verse 11 explicitly mentions that the sons of Korah did not perish when the earth swallowed their family. Descendants of a rebel who was swallowed by the earth continued to live, and centuries later wrote some of the deepest and most beautiful psalms in Israel's hymnal. Psalm 42, Psalm 44, Psalm 45, Psalm 46, Psalm 47, Psalm 48, Psalm 49, Psalm 84, Psalm 85, Psalm 87, Psalm 88, all attributed to the sons of Korah, poetry of genuine worship written by descendants of a man who challenged the very system of worship that God established. Divine mercy operates in layers that take entire generations to be fully understood. The father was judged with total severity. The sons were mysteriously spared. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren wrote psalms that you may have sung in church services without ever knowing where they really came from. Psalm 84, written by the sons of Korah, contains a verse that gains immense weight when you know the family history behind it. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. Descendants of the man who tried to force entry into the Holy of Holies now celebrated the simple privilege of standing at the door on the outside in reverence. The father's rebellion taught the sons the inestimable value of genuine reverence. The severe judgment produced subsequent generations of true worshippers. What seemed like an absolute end became the beginning of something completely different, completely redemptive. The Sinai Desert still exists. The mountains are still there, exactly where they have always been. And somewhere in that silent vastness, there is a piece of ground that opened and closed in a single day, holding 250 bodies that were never buried by human hands. There is no plaque marking the spot. There is no monument built by pilgrims. The earth itself is both the tomb and the memorial. And perhaps that is exactly the point we must understand. Some lessons do not need a memorial built by human hands. All of creation has already witnessed what happened. The ground you walk on today belongs to the same God who opened that ground 3,500 years ago, and that God still dwells among his people. The only difference is that now he dwells in temples of flesh and bone, and the question remains echoing. Through the centuries, with what reverence do you treat the place where God chose to dwell?